Billionaire finds two abandoned babies and discovers they are his illegitimate children. The Thompson Mansion, an imposing structure perched high in Beverly Hills, New York, was known for its tomb-like silence. The only sounds that occasionally echoed through its halls were the methodical footsteps of discreet staff and the occasional clinking of porcelain teacups. This was how Edward Thompson, 45, preferred it. The billionaire had built his life and empire on predictability and absolute control. That September morning, however, something disrupted the meticulously planned routine of the mansion. The sharp, insistent sound of a baby's cry pierced through the heavy oak doors, reaching Edward's ears in his office. He looked up from his computer screen where he was analyzing the latest reports from the Thompson Enterprises conglomerate, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion. "Sophia," he called for his housekeeper, who for 20 years had managed the household with the same efficiency he ran his business. The middle-aged woman appeared at the door, her usually serene face now marked by genuine concern. "Mr. Edward, you need to see this." Something in Sophia's tone made Edward rise immediately. In long strides, he crossed the corridors, adorned with rare works of art, until he reached the entrance hall. What he found there would change his life forever. Two babies, who appeared to be no more than a few months old, were nestled in a luxurious double stroller. They were dressed in delicate clothes and bundled against the chilly New York morning. One was crying, while the other slept peacefully, oblivious to the commotion their presence had caused. "Who left this here?" Edward's voice came out, harsher than he intended, a reflection of the discomfort the situation caused him. "We found it just a few minutes ago, sir, along with this." Sophia handed him a thin paper envelope, sealed with red wax, with fingers that trembled almost imperceptibly. Edward broke the seal. The letter inside, written in elegant handwriting, contained words that shattered his world. "These are your children, Edward, the result of that summer in Miami a year ago. You may not remember me, but I have never forgotten what we shared. Circumstances forced me to leave them in your care. Protect them. They are more important than you can imagine. DNA will confirm what I say. I know you will do the right thing." The paper trembled in his hands. Edward felt his blood run cold as fragments of memory flooded his mind. The summer on his yacht, the woman with the enigmatic smile, the starry nights, the whispered promises. Marina. How could he have forgotten? "Sophia, call Dr. Richard immediately. I want a DNA test done today." His voice came out controlled, but inside a storm was brewing. The housekeeper nodded and quickly walked away, leaving Edward alone with the children. The crying baby opened, its eyes, green eyes identical to his own. Something in his chest tightened. "Impossible," he murmured to himself, but he already knew he was lying. The baby's features were a mirror of his own childhood photos. The phone in his pocket vibrated. It was a message from his sister, Helen. "Have you seen the news? We need to talk. Urgent." Edward frowned. What news? He quickly opened the browser on his phone and his heart nearly stopped. On the front page of the major news portals, mysterious heirs, babies abandoned at billionaire Edward Thompson's mansion. How had the information leaked so quickly? Who else knew? And where was Marina? The baby's cries intensified, bringing Edward back to the immediate reality. Instinctively, he approached the stroller. His hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts, now hesitated at the task of soothing a child. When he finally touched the tiny being, he felt something awaken within him, something he thought he had lost long ago, his humanity. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. Dr. Richard, the family's private physician for decades, arrived discreetly through the back of the mansion, avoiding the photographers already gathering at the gates. While collecting material for the DNA test, he examined the twins with professional care. "They are perfectly healthy babies, Mr. Thompson, approximately 4 months old. They have been very well cared for so far." The doctor paused, adjusting his glasses. "I must say the physical resemblance is remarkable." Edward remained silent, observing the tiny beings who could be his children. The boy had a birthmark identical to his, near the right ear. The girl, though asleep, already showed his distinctive Features. Sophia had improvised a nursery in one of the guest rooms, transforming the austere space into something more welcoming. "We will need supplies, sir. Diapers, powdered milk, clothes." "Arrange for everything," he replied automatically, his brain still processing the magnitude of the situation. The sound of high heels in the hallway announced Helen's arrival even before she burst through the door. His younger sister, always impeccable in her designer suits, seemed especially agitated. "Edward, what is this scandal? How do you let this happen?" Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on the babies. Something in her gaze shifted, but it was so quick that Edward almost missed it. "Helen, now is not the time." "Not the time?" "The media is in an uproar. The company's stock has already dropped 3 points since the news leaked. The board is in panic, and that deal with the global consortium—" "The deal remains as it is," Edward cut her off sharply. Helen moved closer to the babies, studying them with a disturbing intensity. "Do you really believe they're yours? After all these years alone, some random woman shows up with twins and—" "Marina wasn't just some random woman," the words slipped out before he could stop them. Helen's face paled. "Marina? Marina Carter, the same one who—" "Yes," Edward interrupted, not wanting to relive old memories in front of the staff. "This changes everything," Helen murmured, more to herself than to her brother. Her phone vibrated, and she quickly checked it, her expression hardening. "I need to make some calls. Don't make any rash decisions until we talk further." As soon as Helen left, Sophia approached hesitantly. "Sir, there's something I need to tell you." "About Miss Marina?" Edward turned to her, surprised. "You met her?" "Not exactly, but—" Sophia was interrupted by the ringing of Edward's phone. It was the lab. The preliminary DNA results were ready. 99.999% probability of paternity, Dr. Richards' voice came through clearly. "There's no doubt, Mr. Thompson, they are your children." Edward hung up the phone and sank into a nearby chair, his eyes fixed on the babies who were now sleeping peacefully. They were his. "Your blood, your responsibility." An envelope was discreetly slipped under the door of the room. Sophia picked it up and handed it to Edward. Inside, a typed note. "She was taken from you and the children. Discover the truth before it's too late." The billionaire felt a shiver run down his spine. The words in the letter connected with fragments of memories he had long tried to suppress. The last encounter with Marina, her frightened expression, the unspoken words. One of the babies began to cry again, waking the other. Edward stood up, approaching the makeshift crib. This time he didn't hesitate to pick them up. Their weight in his arms seemed to awaken something dormant in his heart. "Sophia, prepare my office. I'll need to make some calls." His voice had a different tone now, determination mixed with something deeper. "And bring all the records we have from the past year, especially anything related to Marina Carter." The housekeeper nodded, but before leaving she turned one last time. "Sir, they'll need names." Edward looked down at the twins in his arms. For a moment he allowed himself to smile. "Michael and Sophia," he said softly. "Like my grandfather, and the woman who always took care of our family." The housekeeper's face lit up with contained emotion, but her smile soon gave way to a worried expression. There was more, much more, that she needed to tell. But would it be safe to do so now? Edward's office, once his refuge of silence and order, was now filled with the gentle sound of a musical mobile that Sophia had improvised for the babies. As he sifted through old documents, he tried to ignore the dozens of missed calls from board members and the press. "Sir," Sophia entered carrying a dusty box. "I found these records from last summer in Miami." Among brochures and documents, a photo slipped out, Marina radiant in a white dress, the sea in the background. Edward felt his heart tighten, her honey-colored eyes, her mysterious smile, the way the wind played with her dark hair. A knock on the door interrupted his reminiscence. It was Roger Smith, his lawyer and longtime friend. "Edward, we need to talk about the global consortium," he said bluntly. "They're nervous about this whole situation. The billion-dollar contract. We were supposed to sign next week." "Let them worry," Edward cut in. "I have more pressing matters now." Roger hesitated, uncomfortable. There's something you need to know. The consortium. They mentioned Marina in our last meeting. Edward froze. What do you mean? It was subtle, but they asked if you had any news about her. I thought it was strange at the time, but now... Roger was interrupted by the cry of one of the babies. Sophia quickly brought Michael, who seemed feverish. "Sir, he's burning up." Edward took his son in his arms, feeling the little body radiate heat. Panic began to set in, a completely new sensation for someone used to having everything under control. "Call Dr. Richard," he ordered, instinctively rocking the baby. As they waited for the doctor, Helen burst through the door. Her eyes widened as she saw her brother cradling the child. "So it's true? You're really going to take in these children?" Her voice had a bitter tone. "Have you thought about what this means for the company? For our family?" "They are my children, Helen. My blood." "Blood?" She laughed humorlessly. "Like the blood that runs through my veins? The same blood you ignored when I needed you?" Edward stared at his sister, surprised by the bitterness in her voice. "What are you talking about? The time I needed capital for my own project, and you refused to help. Learn to fend for yourself, you said, and now," she gestured toward the babies, "two strangers show up, and you're ready to hand everything over to them." Sophia, who was watching the scene, let out an audible sigh. Helen turned to her sharply. "Something to say, Sophia?" The housekeeper paled. "No, ma'am." But Edward noticed the exchange of glances between the two women. There was something there, an unspoken secret. Dr. Richard arrived at that moment, examining Michael carefully. "Just a common fever, probably due to the change in environment. Nothing that some fever reducer won't fix." As the doctor prepared the medication, Edward received an anonymous message on his phone. "Look in the company files. Folder Project Phoenix 2023. There's more about Marina than you think." Helen, who was peeking over her brother's shoulder, visibly paled when she saw the message. "Who's sending this?" Edward demanded. "How would I know?" Helen replied, too quickly heading for the door. "I have an important meeting. We'll talk later." Alone again with the babies and Sophia, Edward began to realize that every answer he got only led to more questions. What did his sister know? What was the global consortium's involvement? And most importantly, where was Marina? Michael finally fell asleep in his arms, his little face still flushed with fever. As he placed him in the crib next to his sister, Edward made a decision. It didn't matter who or what he would face. He would protect his children, at any cost. "Sophia," he called the housekeeper, "I want you to tell me everything you know about Marina. And don't leave anything out this time." The housekeeper twisted her hands nervously. "Sir, there are things that happened back then, things I was forced to do." Sophia sat in the office armchair, her hands trembling slightly as she held her teacup. Across the room, the twins slept peacefully in the makeshift crib. "It started a year ago," she began, her voice low and tense. "Miss Helen came to me with a proposal. She said it was for the good of the family to protect you." Edward remained silent, his eyes fixed on the housekeeper who had been part of his life for so long. Marina had discovered something about the global consortium, something that could jeopardize not only the billion-dollar deal, but the entire reputation of the company. Miss Helen said she needed to remove her from your life before she revealed everything. And you agreed to help. Edward's voice was controlled but filled with disappointment. Sophia swallowed hard. "They had information about my sick grandson. In Florida. They threatened to cut off his treatment." Her words were interrupted by restrained tears. "Go on," Edward ordered, softening his tone slightly. I helped forge emails, intercepted calls. I made Marina believe that you were involved in shady business, that she was in danger if she stayed close." Sophia covered her face with her hands. "But I didn't know she was pregnant. I swear I didn't know." Edward stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over New York, painting the sky blood red. What exactly did Marina find out about the global consortium? "I don't know the details, sir, but it had something to do with Project Phoenix. Marina gained access to confidential documents during a party at her beach house. That same night, she tried to talk to you, but Helen intercepted." Edward completed, the pieces starting to fall into place. Sophia nodded. Miss Helen has been secretly working with the global consortium for months. Something about an asset transfer that would leave her in control of a significant portion of the company. One of the babies stirred in the crib, letting out a small sigh. Edward approached, gently adjusting the blanket over them. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I overheard a conversation last night," Sophia replied, her voice trembling. "Miss Helen was on the phone, discussing the babies. She called them an unwanted complication. She said they needed to be removed from the equation." Edward's blood ran cold. "Where is Marina now?" "I'm not sure, but—" Sophia hesitated, standing up to hand Edward a small card. "I found this among Miss Helen's things. It's the contact information for a private investigator." The card was simple. Claire Miller, private investigation, followed by a phone number. At that moment, Edward's phone vibrated with a new anonymous message. "Marina is alive, but not for long. Vault 237, Federal Reserve, has what you need to know." Sophia paled as she read the message. "Sir, there's one more thing. Miss Helen has a meeting tomorrow with the Global Consortium. I heard her mention something about documents that would prove you're unfit to run the company." Edward looked at his sleeping children, so small and vulnerable, then at the card in his hands, and finally at Sophia, who seemed to have aged 10 years during that conversation. "Sophia, I need you to take care of the children for a few hours. I'm going to pay a visit to the bank." "Sir," she called out as he was already at the door, "be careful. Miss Helen, she's not the same person we used to know." Edward nodded, his face marked by iron determination. As he closed the office door, he could hear the beginning of one of the baby's cries. His heart tightened, but he knew he had to act fast. Time was running out, and somewhere Marina needed him. The Federal Reserve stood imposingly against the night sky of New York. Edward crossed the main lobby, heading toward the private vault area. A woman was waiting for him. Claire Miller, the private investigator, with graying hair and a sharp gaze. "Mr. Thompson," she greeted discreetly. "Marina hired me 6 months ago." On the way to Vault 237, Claire explained her involvement. "Your ex-partner knew she was in danger. She hired me to document everything and protect the evidence." The vault revealed its contents: a folder filled with documents, a flash drive, and a handwritten letter from Marina. "Dear Edward, if you're reading this, it means our children have reached you. Forgive me for not telling you about the pregnancy, but I discovered terrible things about the Global Consortium. Project Phoenix isn't what it seems. It's a front to divert billions in public funds. Your sister Helen is deeply involved. I tried to warn you that night in Miami, but Helen intercepted. She orchestrated everything, the fake emails, the threats, my disappearance. I found out she plans to use the consortium to take control of the company, but she needs to get you out of the way first. I kept our children hidden as long as I could, but it's no longer safe. Trust Claire. She has all the evidence. And Edward, despite everything, I never stopped loving you, Marina." Claire presented more documents. "Your sister has a meeting tomorrow with the consortium. She plans to present forged psychiatric reports about you, claiming mental instability after the arrival of the children." How did Marina find out about all this? She worked in the legal department of the Federal Reserve. She found irregularities in the consortium's transfers. Helen discovered and... Claire hesitated. Edward's phone vibrated. A message from Sophia. "The babies are restless. I think they miss you." At that moment, something changed in Edward. Years of corporate coldness melted away in the face of newfound paternal love. "Where is Marina?" "Protected for now. But we need to act quickly. The consortium won't easily give up on the billions involved in the project." Edward examined the documents. Irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy, including incriminating emails from Helen and consortium executives. "Claire, I need your help with a plan. We're going to turn this around, but first..." He picked up the phone. "I need to get back to my children." As he left the bank, Edward realized his life had completely changed. He was no longer just the reclusive billionaire. He was a father, a man with a mission. And for the first time in years, He felt something different in his chest. Hope. The mansion was quiet when Edward returned. In the makeshift nursery, he found Sophia rocking the twins. "They needed you," the housekeeper said softly. "Michael wouldn't stop crying until he heard your voice on the phone." Edward picked up his son, feeling the little body instantly relax against his chest. Sophia smiled discreetly before leaving him alone with the children. Claire arrived an hour later, carrying a case with surveillance equipment. "I got access to the cameras in the office where the meeting will be held tomorrow," she informed. "Helen will arrive at 9. "And the consortium?" "Marcus Johnson, CEO, and 3 other executives. We have wiretaps on all their phone lines." Claire hesitated. "There's one more thing. Marina left a video." On the laptop, Marina's image appeared, pale but determined. "Edward, if you're seeing this, it means our children are with you. Project Phoenix isn't just about money. It involves overpriced contracts in public hospitals. Your sister, she planned everything from the start. She pushed me away because she knew I would tell the truth. Now she plans to use our children as a pretext to remove you from the presidency. I can't show myself yet, but I'm closer than you. Take care of Michael and Sophia. We'll be together soon." Edward felt his heart tighten. "How will we do it?" Claire laid out the plan. During the meeting, they would live-stream the recorded confessions of the global consortium executives to all the shareholders. Simultaneously, the evidence would be sent to selected journalists. "And Helen?" "Leave your sister to me." A familiar voice sounded from the door. It was Sophia, her face marked by determination. "I know all her secrets. It's time to fix my mistakes." Edward spent the entire night awake, preparing every detail. Between a virtual meeting with his lawyers and another with Claire, he found himself watching his children sleep. How had he lived so long without this love? His phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Tomorrow, during the meeting, pay attention to Helen's brooch. It's a camera. Be careful what you say." Marina was closer than he imagined. His heart raced at the possibility of seeing her again. In the early hours of the morning, while feeding Sophia with a bottle, Edward received confirmation. All the evidence was ready. The plan would be executed in less than 6 hours. "Your father is doing this for you," he whispered to the babies, "so we can have the chance to be a real family." Clara returned at dawn with the final instructions. Sophia prepared the office, strategically placing hidden microphones. "Edward," Clara called out before leaving, "Marina asked me to tell you something in case everything went well. Remember our promise in Miami? It still stands." He remembered. The starry night, the calm sea, the words exchanged under the moonlight. A promise of eternal love that now took on new meaning. The office of Thompson Enterprises buzzed with tension that morning. Edward sat at the head of the conference table, seemingly calm, but his fingers tapped discreetly beneath the table. Helen arrived first, impeccable in her red suit, the suspicious brooch gleaming on her lapel. "Good morning, brother. Ready to do the right thing?" Marcus Johnson and the executives from the global consortium entered next. Edward noticed the knowing glance exchanged between his sister and the CEO. "Mr. Thompson," Marcus began, "we understand your delicate situation. 2 abandoned babies, the media pressure. We agree that a temporary leave would be prudent. For the good of the company," Helen added, her voice honeyed, "I have here the medical reports confirming your unstable emotional state." Edward allowed himself a small smile. "Interesting that you mentioned medical reports, Helen. How about we discuss some other documents as well?" With a click, the screens on the walls lit up. Emails, contracts, and spreadsheets from Project Phoenix began to appear. "What kind of game is this?" Marcus stood up, his face red. "This is no joke." Claire appeared at the door, accompanied by 2 executives from the Federal Reserve. "These are proofs of fraud, corruption, and embezzlement of public funds." Helen tried to reach for her phone, but Sophia, who was serving coffee, accidentally spilled the drink on her bag. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The shareholders are watching everything live," Edward informed, "as well as some selected journalists." "You don't understand," Helen hissed. "I did all this for the family. You always had everything. The presidency, the control, the father's admiration. What did I have? And Marina, Edward questioned. Was that for the family too? That meddler found out too much. I had to remove her before she ruined everything. On the big screen, Marina's face appeared in a live video call. Hello, Helen, I missed you. The color drained from Helen's face. Marcus tried to leave the room but was stopped by security guards. It's over, Edward declared. The Federal Reserve is already aware of everything. The fraudulent contracts, the threats, the scheme to push me out of the company. Helen laughed, a bitter sound. And what are you going to do? Report me? Your own sister? No, Edward replied. I'll give you two options. Resign from your positions and disappear, or face the legal consequences of your actions. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen looked at Marcus, who was already negotiating his surrender with Federal Reserve agents. Your choice, sister, Edward concluded, but choose quickly. I have 2 babies waiting for me at home. The office emptied rapidly. Helen, after one last look filled with pain and resentment, signed her resignation and left escorted by security. Marcus and the executives from the global consortium were taken to give their statements. The babies need you, Sophia whispered to Edward, and there's someone else waiting in the winter garden. Edward hurried through the mansion, his heart racing as he spotted the familiar silhouette by the orchids, Marina thinner and paler than he remembered, but still breathtaking. They have your eyes, she said softly, turning to face him. Marina, Edward's voice faltered. Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy? When I found out, I was already being threatened. Helen had fabricated evidence against me and threatened to harm the children if I didn't disappear. She stepped closer. I hired Claire the day I found out I was expecting twins. I needed to make sure the truth would come out. Edward closed his eyes, recalling the last time he had seen her in Miami. You tried to warn me that night. Helen intercepted everything. Messages, emails, even the letters I sent. I had to wait until I had enough proof. Marina gently touched his face. But I never doubted that you would protect our children once you knew the truth. A baby's cry echoed through the house. Marina flinched, her eyes welling with tears. Come, Edward took her hand. They're waiting for you. In the nursery, Sophia was rocking Michael while Sophia slept. Upon seeing Marina, the nanny smiled through tears. Forgive me, she pleaded. I should have told you everything sooner. You're forgiven, Marina replied, taking Michael into her arms. The baby instantly calmed upon recognizing his mother's scent. Edward watched the scene, his heart overflowing. Marina rocked Michael, humming the same lullaby he had heard her sing on those nights in Miami. Our promise, he murmured, to build something real, far from the lies of the corporate world. It still stands, Marina smiled, tears streaming down her face. Now more than ever. Little Sophia woke up, her green eyes blinking curiously. Edward picked her up, moving closer to Marina and Michael. A family, he said. It's all I ever wanted and never knew. The following weeks brought profound changes to the Thompson mansion. Edward's old office was transformed into a spacious nursery, with soft-colored walls and musical mobiles. Marina moved in permanently, occupying the main suite with Edward. I never imagined I'd see the almighty Edward Thompson changing diapers, Sophia joked, watching him care for Michael with surprising skill. Neither did I imagine I'd be so good at it, he replied, smiling as his son gripped his finger tightly. Marina entered the room, carrying little Sophia after her bath. The journalists have finally left. The story of the billionaire who chose family over empire is losing steam. What about the consortium? The Federal Reserve has taken over. The investigations. Marcus and the other executives are cooperating in exchange for deals. As for Helen, Marina hesitated. She's in Europe, Edward finished. She resigned from everything, as we agreed. Sophia, the housekeeper, approached with a tray of tea. The house has never felt so alive. Remember when your mother used to play the piano on Sunday afternoon, sir? Edward nodded, memories of his childhood resurfacing. Marina, do you play? A little, she smiled. Would you like me to teach our children? The grand piano, covered for years, was reopened. Marina sat with little Sophia on her lap, her fingers gently gliding over the keys. The soft melody filled the mansion, erasing the last traces of loneliness that had long inhabited those walls. Edward watched the scene, Michael asleep in his arms, when Claire appeared at the door. "The final documents for the case have been filed," she discreetly informed. "And I brought this." She handed him an envelope. Inside was an old photo. Edward and Helen as children, smiling, embraced in the same winter garden where he had reunited with Marina. "She left this for you," Claire explained. "Along with a letter." Edward read in silence, discreet tears escaping his eyes. Helen asked for forgiveness, explaining how envy and bitterness had consumed her over the years. She promised to seek help, regain his trust, and one day meet the nieces and nephews. "Keep this," he asked Sophia. "When the children are older, they'll want to know the full story of our family." Marina began to play a lullaby. The babies, as if by magic, fell into a deep sleep. "I think we've found our new routine," Edward whispered, gently kissing Marina's forehead. "A much better routine than endless spreadsheets and meetings," she replied, her eyes shining with love. A year later, the garden of the Thompson mansion was decorated for a special celebration, the twins' first birthday. Marina's favorite orchids framed the space, while colorful balloons danced in the gentle afternoon breeze. Michael and Sophia, now with wobbly steps, explored the garden under the watchful eyes of their parents. Edward had traded his formal suits for more casual attire, his face softened by the smile that now rarely left him. "Who would have thought," Roger remarked, watching his friend and former boss chase the children across the lawn. "The coldest man in New York transformed by love." Marina, radiant in a blue dress, played the piano on the terrace. The music blended with the children's laughter, creating a symphony of happiness that echoed throughout the property. Sophia, the housekeeper, now officially the twins' godmother, was organizing the dessert table when she noticed movement at the gate. Helen was there, hesitant. "You came," Edward approached his sister. "I received your invitation, but I wasn't sure." Helen seemed smaller, more humble. Therapy and time away had brought visible changes. Marina rose from the piano, picking up baby Sophia in her arms. "Come meet your niece. She has your eyes." Tears streamed freely down Helen's face as her niece reached out her tiny arms toward her. Michael, curious, also approached, clinging to his aunt's leg. "Forgive me," Helen whispered, "for everything." Edward embraced his sister, years of resentment dissolving in that gesture. Family is family, always. Claire, who had documented the entire journey in photographs, captured the moment. "For the twins' memory album," she explained, smiling. Sophia brought the cake. 2 small golden crowns adorned it. "For our little princes," she joked. As they sang Happy Birthday, Edward looked at his gathered family. The business empire continued, but now it was managed differently. He had learned to delegate, to trust, to balance work and love. Marina intertwined her fingers with his. "What are you thinking about?" "How unpredictable life is," he replied. "A year ago I was a lonely man living only for work. Today you're a father, a husband, a brother," she finished. "All the roles you were always meant to play." The twins were trying to reach the candles on the cake, their little faces lit up with joy. Helen was helping her niece, while Sophia filmed everything. "Do you know what else I've learned this year?" Edward asked, pulling Marina closer. "What?" "That sometimes we need to lose control to find what truly matters." The sun was setting on the horizon of New York, painting the sky in golden hues. In the Thompson mansion, where silence once reigned, laughter, music, and love now echoed. Edward had finally understood. His greatest achievement wasn't in the numbers of his bank account, but in the smiles of his children, in Marina's love, in his sister's forgiveness. The orchids in the winter garden, silent witnesses to the entire story, bloomed more beautifully than ever, as if they too were celebrating the triumph of love over ambition, of truth over lies, of family over loneliness. "Forever?" Marina asked, reviving the old promise of Miami. "Forever," Edward confirmed, kissing her gently as their children ran around them, free and happy, as it should have been from the start.